right,
Matt?
I think I'm up now.
Yep.
And we are covering the Laws with their only album, The Laws. I'll run some numbers here. Actually, no. Let me do the songs first. So, in the opening montage, you heard a clip from "There She Goes," and now you're going to hear a clip from "Doldrum."
Know what's good for you, but then you know what you can do. But it's get up a bus and shout, get on the bus, get out and
All right, and so the Laws comes in at number 112 in the 1990s on Best Ever Albums, number 9 in 1990, number 665 of all time. It is the Laws' highest rated album on Best Ever Albums because it's also the only album. And they are ranked number 649 of overall artist rankings on Best Ever Albums. This record did not make Rolling Stone's list. And some information on them. This is the first time we're covering the Laws. They have been described as, in their genre of alternative rock, jangle pop, Brit pop, and indie pop. This particular record was released on October 1st, 1990, and it reached number 30 in the UK, but did not do well overseas. I don't believe it charted in the US. It is, like I said, it's the only album that they released, but they do have 10 compilation and live albums, so there's plenty of other versions of songs and live versions of songs that didn't make it to the record that are out there. The band was formed in 1983 by Mike Badger, and he's actually not on this record. He's formed the band, but then quit several years later after getting into a fight with the main guy behind the band, who is Lee Mavers. And Badger said that the band was mostly influenced on their inception by Captain Beefheart, of all people.
Nice.
And other influences, other influences have included.
I don't hear it.
They kind of morphed afterwards, but other influences that they've been attributed to include Bo Diddley, Bob Dylan, Louis Armstrong, the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, the Who, the Kinks, Bob Marley, Pink Floyd, Jimi Hendrix, Duke Ellington, and Ella Fitzgerald.
Yes.
Similar artists to them include the Stone Roses, XTC, James, Morrissey, Oasis, REM, and the Sundays, who we covered last week, and they've also been cited to influence bands like Sixpence None the Richer, who covered their big hit, the Cardigans, Blur, Oasis, the Libertines, in the 1975. And Noel Gallagher of Oasis actually named this album as one of his 13 favorite albums of all time.
13.
Yes.
13 favorite albums of all time by Noel Gallagher. So there's been a ton. This is one of those bands that's gone through a ton of lineup changes, but the core of the band include Lee Mavers on lead vocals and guitar, and John Power on bass and backing vocals. Also credited on this record are Peter Camel on lead guitar and Neil Mavers, who is Lee's brother, on drums. There She Goes is their biggest hit. Obviously, if it's got like a bazillion listens on Spotify, and then like everything else is
248,624,904 as of right now.
And what's number 2, John? Do you have that pulled up? What's the
second on this album?
Yeah.
On this album, it would be the 7,018,247 of Feelin', which I would not have expected to be the second biggest song, but okay.
So but There She Goes is their big hit. It was actually released as a single in 1988 first, and it reached number 13 on the UK charts and 49 in the US. It's their most successful single. Interesting tidbit about the song: it contains no verses. It's only the single chorus repeated 4 times, which
that's true.
There's no verses to this. It's just the chorus. So a couple of fun facts about this particular record. The recording process was pretty arduous, and it's one of the main reasons the band didn't last longer than it. It's one of those things where Mavers had the idea in his head of what he wanted the record to sound like, and he could never get it replicated to his liking in the recording process.
Brian Wilson syndrome, what are we going to call that? Should we?
And they went after, there was like 12 different studio sessions. They went through 10 different band members, 7 producers, 3 years of recording. So it was just a big shit show. Finally, and it was an estimated cost of about £1 million. And essentially the record label finally, told the final producer, who was Steve Lillywhite, look, just put the album out. Like, so Lillywhite just got a bunch of stuff together and mixed it and sent it out. And Mavers hated it as soon as he heard it. He's like, he hates this record. There's not one good thing I can find to say about it. It's like a snake with a broken neck. So the One Laws album is derided by its main member. So I thought that was interesting. This is I thought this was kind of a fun stat. So this is one of this album was listed on Rolling Stone's list of the 40 greatest one album wonders of all time. And there's been a number of other records that we have covered that fit that category. Does anybody care to venture a guess onto some of those records for a fun little game here? One album, one hit wonder.
So, the Zombies, Odyssey, and Oracle, would that be on
Nope.
there? Okay. Nope. The Feelies, Crazy Rhythms?
Nope.
Wow.
I think the Phillies have more than one. There's
Did
8.
they?
By the way,
Okay,
there's
I'm
8 albums that they listed on this on the 40 list that we've covered already. So
Oh, wow.
The United States of America?
that's one. Yep.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of like one-offs that that were, wow. I need more time and I don't want to kill
Yeah,
it, but
that's fine.
I'm going to try to say some as the show goes on. Are you okay with that if I indulge myself?
Okay.
If one
Yeah.
pops
All
up?
right. We can
Or
come
I'll
back
just
to
do
that.
this segment. If something comes up, I'll
Right.
think of it.
Fair
So,
enough.
yeah.
Okay. So Lee Mavers has only performed 20 times live since 1991. He basically, after this record, the band disbanded, and he kind of holed up. He has a normal life. He's got a wife and like 4 kids, and just makes a ton of money off of the. I think Badger said that There She Goes is the best thing that ever happened to him, and it's also the worst thing because he doesn't really need to write anything more because he just makes a ton of money off of the residuals off of that song. So he's kind of just a regular dude now that doesn't really play live at all. And John Power, the bass player, he actually went on to form another band called Cast. They have 6 records. And he left in December of 1991, which was officially the end of the Laws.
I think I thought of 2, by the way.
Okay, go ahead, John. Yeah.
X-Ray Specs,
Nope.
Soft Boys, Underwood or Moonlight.
Nope.
No,
Those
okay,
are good
wow.
guesses. I
Yeah.
can't tell you if those bands have more than one album, but no,
Okay.
those were not on this list. So
okay.
And this band is known as one of the forerunners of the genre, the subgenre that would become known as Britpop. So there you go. That's the Laws, and let's start with our takes here. Josh, let's give John some more time to think about those other albums. What do you think of this record?
Oh, man. This album is delightful. I'm so glad I listened to it. I actually didn't know the original version of There She Goes. I think I only heard Sixpence None
Really?
the Richer.
You just keep
originally.
surprising me. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
And because that song was ubiquitous when they had it, I didn't even know it was a cover. I just assumed it was theirs. And it's not like I'm a Sixpence None the Richer fan. I didn't even know they were a Christian rock band. I saw that. anyway, that's tangent. This album is so melodic and cheerful and has like all of the hallmarks of things that we talked about in 60s Britpop. Like, I mean, they're so inspired by the Kinks, which obviously I love, and it just feels like a Britpop album. It feels retro or timeless in some way. The lead singer has this kind of certain way that he hangs on words or says certain words that I can tell he's British, but it's just like a funny delivery. They have these great guitar chords and riffs that they do. Certain guitar chords I always like strike a chord immediately with me, or they're so recognizable, but I can't always place them to a certain song. But like I Can't Sleep has this guitar chord that is so like familiar, but like in a welcoming, like comforting way. And so this band just won me over immediately. Son of a Gun is a fun opening track. It kind of sets the tone immediately. Liberty Ship is really interesting. That is a Kinks-esque song. I like how the bass like has this bass line and then the guitar follows it. They're not like playing at the same time. I thought that was really interesting. And I mean, there's no bad tracks on this album. It's very concise. It's every song is great. I can see Feeling as being a second favorite track on Amazon. It's also the second most popular track. It's got this real like up-tempo happy feeling to it. and they just have a great, like, really compact delivery to them. I love the fact that it's just like, I don't know, it just rings good Britpop to me in such like a great way. And obviously like Oasis and Blur like ran with this in a completely like homage, like intentionally more like intentionally referential direction. But I feel like this is, they make it their own, but there's these like threads of their influences, and you can kind of hear the Beatles, you can kind of hear these other bands, but they just make it their own, and it's just really great pop music, almost in the same way that like Big Star was for me. They not a one-hit wonder band, or not a one album band, but just like taking some essence of music that I really respond to in rock and roll, and making it. And this is a great discovery for me, and a big thumbs up.
Okay, and all that time thinking, guys, I could only think of like maybe one other band. Like I was like, no, they had a couple. So I wasn't. I didn't want to look at the list or anything.
Yeah.
Was the DB stands for decibels? Was that one?
Nope.
Is the MC5 on there?
Nope.
No, they have another one. They have a second. No, they have a second one.
I'm looking at
Okay,
our
you
list.
gotta tell me. I'm baffled.
Operation
Because I know,
Ivy.
like in the '90s. Oh, that's right. I know in the '90s, like Neutral Milk Hotel, right, would be on that list and stuff because they're.
Yeah,
famous for-
I just went over the ones. I can't remember if
Yeah.
that was on. I just noted the ones that we had
Ones we've
covered
already
already.
done.
So
Okay.
Operation Ivy.
Yeah.
You already said the United States of America.
Right.
Dennis Wilson, Pacific Ocean Blue.
That was a good album.
So solo. I didn't know solo. I would have been easier if I knew artists.
It's
Okay.
anybody. Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah,
Okay.
it's not bands. It's
Oh, I
any-
just thought it
any
was
artist.
bands. I was like,
Yep.
okay. I might
But
have
you know what
gotten a
though?
couple more.
That's the only solo artist, so it doesn't really matter.
Okay, all right, fair enough.
The Monks, John, way back. In
Oh
the, way back
wow,
machine with the
yeah,
Monks,
Black Monk time.
Yep.
I should have gotten that.
Yep. Young Marble Giants. With
Yeah,
Colossal Youth.
That was a good
Yep.
album.
The Modern Lovers album.
Oh,
They only had one album.
I thought they had more.
Yeah,
I thought
no,
they
that
had
was
more. I would have never guessed that.
that was almost like, and that was like the album I think they recorded, and like it was like a collection of like not B-sides necessarily, but it was like demos really. It was just
Yeah.
like kind of cobbled together, so it wasn't even like a.
I
hey,
had
we're
no
gonna
idea
go
they
into
only had
this
one album.
Yep.
Wow.
Derek and the Dominoes, Layla.
Okay.
Oh yeah, I would have never got that, but yes, you're right.
And
Yep.
finally, the one that I didn't think of, we all should have gotten. It's number one. It's Never Mind the Bullocks. Here's the Sex Pistols.
Oh, yep.
Yeah, I just always remember they had that EP, so I didn't know if that counted or not. But yeah, that's a good one. That
Not
probably
according
should've
to
gotten
Rolling Stone, anyway. But
Yeah.
I thought that was a fun little trip down memory
Interesting.
lane.
Yeah,
but,
definitely.
yeah,
Good pull, Matt.
but John,
Yeah, I love
what
it.
are your thoughts of the
So
Laws?
this was such an interesting album because every time I listened to it, I liked it more. The first time I listened to it, I would say it was kind of in the middle for me. And then I re-listened. I'm like, wow, I like this album a lot better than the last time. And then I actually did listen to it for a third time. I pulled a Matt. I'm not going to listen like 16 times like Matt does, but a third time. And the third time, I really liked it. And you're right, Josh. It's something, it feels a little old at times. There's songs that feel as old as like if you were listening to like the Dave Clark 5 or something like way back in the 60s, right? Like real early rock. Obviously, they have a Spirit Animal and the Kinks, right? And that's the Britpop because they do sound like the Britpop that's coming. And that's why I was laughing when it was like, okay, Liam Gallagher likes. I'm like, yeah, well, there's a lot of Britpop that you Blur, Oasis, they all kind of Superchunk, right? Like there's Libertines was mentioned, right? That's another band that this sounds a lot like. And I just really came to appreciate it. You know what it ended up being similar lane to me, guys, was the Violent Femmes album, where it has some elements of like almost folky type music and straight ahead rock. I just keep going in a lot of different directions. The other thing is this is the first rock album we've listened to in this season that sounds like the 90s, doesn't it? Like this is like a 90s rock album, 90s indie album to me. It, even though it's backward looking, there's production elements and song elements that really scream 90s to me. But it comes in strong with Son of a Gun. I think that's a pretty striking single. There She Goes is huge. Matt made a good choice in Doldrum, and not surprisingly, because I would say Doldrum has a little bit of a Beatle-esque feel to it, would be how I describe it. And yeah, there's there's really good tracks that litter this album. And it really, it's in my top 10 of albums we've listened to in terms of the replay like every time I listened to it, it got better, right? Like there's albums like that I listen to multiple times that they noticeably grow on me just in the time I have to listen to it, because there's other albums that can grow on me, right? But normally it's over the course of weeks or months or years as I reappraise, grow different stuff. This was it within the 3 listens. It grew on me quite a bit. And so by the end of it, I was just really digging it. And I got it. And I think this album was what I wanted that Stone Roses album to be, guys. Like, I think that with all the talk of the Stone Roses and listening, I don't know if I expected it to sound like this, but I wanted the feeling after listening 3 of this where I'm like, I get this and I enjoy this and sign me up, right? And I think that's what I thought was going to happen with the Stone Roses album, and might have happened for you guys listening, because I know you were higher on it, but just didn't happen for me. And the 3 times I listened to Stone Roses albums, it just didn't push it over for me. But this was a constant evolution that I really liked. A little bit old, a little bit new, a little bit of what's to come. And yet the bio also did a very good job, Matt, of sort of letting a listener know what they're in for. So I really enjoyed this one. Definite thumbs up for me.
So I had an interesting listening experience with this as well. It's obviously I knew There She Goes, and I was expecting the rest of the album to sound like that, but
Which
that
it doesn't
song,
at all, yeah.
It stands out, right? That to me sounds way more. That's more of the '90s pop.
Yep.
And I agree with you, Josh. I knew the Sixpence None the Richer out version better than this, but I had heard this plenty of times.
Oh, that's funny. I know this one so much better. That's crazy.
I just remember that was the introduction. Their version was the introduction of that song, and so for years up until this past week, I knew that the Laws did that song, but I didn't know anything else by them, which is kind of surprising. Like, I should have, like, that's a song I loved, and I should have gone, back to that. Like, what else do they got going on? But anyway, I'm doing it now. Ben Gibbard actually gave an interview. I read too that they asked him like what he thought the perfect pop song was, and he said that There She Goes would be it for him. Which makes sense. It's a great song. So it was kind of like. And last week comparing this album with the Sundays, because the Sundays did, Here's Where the Story Ends. And my fear with that album was that, like, that song's going to be the clear standout, and then everything else is going to pale in comparison. And I did not feel that at all. And this album, I was like, okay, There She Goes. The rest of the album's going to sound like this. It's going to be like, because I thought that the Sundays, all the songs kind of sounded similar. And so this was different because none of these songs sounded like There She Goes. And I was surprised.
I was going to say, you don't have to worry about that on this album.
This album, to me, sounds more 60s than it does 90s. I mean, to
be honest, it's both. It's both to me.
And I agree with you, John, because there's certain songs that I was like, man, this songs like, or even like early 2000s, because this is more, to me, this is more garage rock than it is Brit.
Well, how well do you go? Oh, to me, this sounds like Britpop, and we haven't really covered it yet. And Britpop's nostalgic, so that's how it can sound both 60s and 90s, because it is.
And that's kind of where I was going, because when you first listen to this, it's got a lo-fi production, and it is like some of it's like Dave Clark 5, some of it's the Kinks. Actually, I thought Doldrum was more of a Rolling Stones, is kind of a grimier sound and like a dirtier sound that the Rolling Stones do versus the Beatles, but there's still Beatlesque elements of this. But a lot of these songs with the lo-fi production and just the way that there's some psychedelia going on as well, and the garage rock, going back to the Nuggets album that we did all those a couple years ago, kind of really
Artifacts,
psychedelic. What's that? Artifacts. Yes. Kind of where the psychedelic and the garage rock genres kind of meld. And so I was hearing a lot of that here. And then the more I listened to it, the more I was kind of seeing into a band like, I don't know, Jet or something like that, right? That's got that very kind of, straight ahead rock sound it's a little grimy, it's Britpop, but it's also garage rock. So this album's really interesting because to me it's really bridging the 60s and the 90s together, and even the early 2000s. But this is awesome. Like, this is like, I loved it. Right, I was surprised, right, because I was like, man, this is not if I had bought this album back in 1990 off the strength of There She Goes, I'm not saying I would have been disappointed, but I would have been, wow, surprised. I wouldn't have expected this to, I thought there would be more of a pop sheen, crispy, production to it that the rest of the album doesn't have. But I'm okay with that because every song on here is freaking kick ass. It's great, great guitar riffs. It's interesting. It's more varied than the Sundays record. I think that was maybe a little bit of a knock that we had. I had a knock against that, but I was okay with it because I love that sound so much, and I was okay with that. This kind of trumps that for me because I still love all the songs, but the variety there just makes it ups it even more to make it a more of an interesting record for me. So yeah, big thumbs up. It's just it's a breeze. It's 35 minutes long, and there's 12 songs, and the last one is almost 8 minutes. Yeah. Right. So I don't know if that needs to be 8 minutes, but I'm fine with it being 8 minutes because it's still, Looking Glass is still a good tune. But yeah, what a great band. It's, it's sad that they've only got one album, that they weren't able to keep it together. Lee Mavers apparently was just a really difficult personality, a perfectionist in the studio. And, the reason why the guy that formed this band, the reason that this band exists wasn't even playing on this record because he quit years before because he couldn't stand, he didn't get along with Lee Mavers so much to the point where he left his own band, so that's how difficult he was. But great record. This is going to be high up on my list.
Yeah, they just have like this, they have these catchy hooks and like choruses that you can sing along to, and they're just a little different than standard fare or what would become standard fare, and I don't know, it's akin to like other British bands that I think we kind of were delightfully surprised about, were like Orange Juice and Haircut 100 and those types of like kind of bands that were under the radar, not necessarily sounding the same, but all British and all kind of like fun and like fizzy. I feel this band has like this fun energy to it that I respond to, and and ultimately it's like the guitars and like the rock and roll that I like the most. So
yeah, I was high on this album very high. I don't know if I was quite as high on it as you guys. I think some of it is because knowing where it's going, I don't know if the singularity of it stands out as much to me, maybe. I'll be curious when you hear some other stuff if this retains its lofty thing or if it, I don't know. It could be either because it is beating those albums to the punch.
Do you think other Britpop albums are stronger than this one? Is that why?
I'm going to refrain from that comment until we listen to them. I also think that people were doing this along the way, right? Like doing sort of this type. And to me, this is who I compare this to, is Who's Coming Later, but also, the top end tier of like something like the Kinks, right? Yeah. Where they're just banging out just the types of songs that are so enjoyable on this, but they're writing these all-timers, right? And another band that I would say has some similarity, like I said, I do see a little bit of Violent Femmes in this. I see a little bit of Buzzcocks in this. You mentioned Big Star, right? But yeah, the Britishness, right, of the Buzzcocks. Some people say they're more punk. I don't think so. Even though they don't sound exactly well, no, that's actually not as good a comparison. So yeah, but I did really like this album. Yeah. So
yeah, and I think you're probably right, John. I mean, they're not reinventing anything necessarily. It's kind of just rehashing other stuff. But I don't know if you do it so well. This is endless re-listenability for me. This is an album that I don't think will get old anytime.
Yeah, me too.
So,
I kept re-listening to it. So there you go.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I just think it's funny that Mavers, the guy behind this, hates this album. It's like, it's so good.
I don't know if the album could be made that he was looking for. You know? So, yeah.
I almost wish that could be made because I would love to hear like what the difference is, and like even if I would notice a difference. Or
it'll be like Chinese Democracy. It comes out and you're like, like really? Like you did all this and
You worked on it for 20 years.
Yeah.
Good point.
Or when we listened to Brian Wilson Smile, it's like, is it really that better than what he Smiley he said was awful? It's like, I don't know. Yeah. Especially when you had Pet Sounds or like actually you have Appetite for Destruction. It's like, I don't know if you need to spend all that time. Let's just lean into it. So.